The Interstellar Song Contest was an episode this season that I wasn't all that excited for. So did this episode work, and what do I think about the big reveal at the end of this episode? Okay, so obviously the 6th episode of Doctor Who Season 2, the Interstellar Song Contest, aired almost a week ago now, and so I'd first like to just apologise with how late this review is to coming out. I've been very busy this week, both with work and with other things, which you'll hopefully be seeing very soon. But like I said at the start of this video, I wasn't all that excited for this episode. I mentioned this at the end of last week's review. It just didn't seem like my kind of thing, and I'm not a big fan of Eurovision, but I was excited because I knew we were going to be getting some sort of reveal for Mrs. Flood at the end of the episode. So with all that being said, what did I think to this episode? Before we get into that review, I just want to mention, in celebration of Doctor Who Season 2 airing, I currently have a discount on my Patreon for 50% off your first month of any paid tier on my Patreon page when you use code SEASON2. So I'll make sure to have the Patreon linked in the description down below, but that's just a little discount I'm running in celebration of Doctor Who Season 2. And without further ado, let's get back into the review. So once again, this episode opens with us continuing the story of the Doctor trying to get Belinda home, which is nice that we're still continuing the story. However, this time it's thankfully progressed a little bit, as we now know the Vindicator is ready to get them home. And we also have Mrs. Flood watching and having an interest in the Vindicator. And with this episode, like many of the other episodes this season, it still makes sense that Belinda wants to stick around for a bit, even if the Vindicator is finished doing its thing this time, given that she's clearly a fan of Eurovision and wants to stay to watch the song contest. But obviously, this doesn't all go to plan, as Kid breaks into the gallery to take over the song contest, blowing up the arena, leading to everyone being flung into space, including the Doctor, which gives us some great and dark visuals for this episode, which makes sense because this is apparently the most expensive episode of Doctor Who, and the visuals really demonstrate that and work really well. This leads to the Doctor having visions of Susan to push him to survive and get out of the situation using a confetti cannon, and I think this was a really nice moment and a good way to have a cameo from Carol Ann Ford as Susan in this episode. I'm assuming that this means that Susan is probably going to return for some reason in the finale, otherwise I don't see why they would have shown this. But either way, I think it is also a bit weird, because if she isn't showing up in the finale, then it does seem a little bit random that they would tease us with this if she isn't going to show up. And even if she is, it does seem weird that they would tease this late into the season. Obviously she was mentioned a lot in season 1 as well, but if she's going to be in the finale of this season, you'd think there would have been more mentions of her besides this moment right before the finale. But this does also have me worried as well, because one of the Susan cameos shows up when we're focused on Belinda, which makes me worry that we're going to have some weird twist with Belinda related to Susan, like she's going to be some bi-generated Susan or something weird like that, which I really hope they don't do, because I just want Belinda to be a normal companion and just be Belinda, because I like her as she is. Obviously, like I mentioned, the Doctor escapes being trapped in space by using the confetti cannon, meeting some great side characters for this episode in Mike and Gary. And I have to say, I haven't personally seen anyone else say this, so it might just be me, but when Mike, who is of course medically trained, is treating the Doctor, he's giving Doctor vibes to me. And so if they're looking back at actors who have already appeared in the show to play the Doctor in the future, like they've done in the past with like Peter Capaldi and stuff, I definitely think he could be a good choice, but that might just be me. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. And this is unfortunately where the positives of this episode end for me, because this episode obviously towards the end has a confrontation between the Doctor and Kid, and although what Kid is doing is wrong, making him out to be a purely bad guy just feels very off to me. Kid has some very justifiable reasons for what he's doing, even if he is going about it the wrong way. At the end of the day, he is a freedom fighter who's survived a genocide. Especially with the Doctor's backstory, you'd expect him to sympathise with Kid in some way, instead of saying the things that he says in this episode to him. I understand that the Doctor doesn't necessarily know Kid's backstory at this point, as only Belinda has been told about it by Cora, and the Doctor likely only finds out about all this when watching Cora perform her song. And while I understand that we're not supposed to like the Doctor in this moment, and I do like seeing this Doctor in his darker moments, the optics of having a character who is a genocide survivor being played by an actor who is also a genocide survivor torturing another survivor of genocide does just feel wrong to me. And I also don't know how much of this episode is meant to be an allegory for the current situation situation with Eurovision and its relationship to Israel and Palestine, given when this episode was likely written, but if it is meant to be commenting on that, I think it goes about it the wrong way and gets the wrong message across. With that being said, I think the way that they save everybody from the song contest is well set up with the holograms at the beginning of the episode where we see Graham Norton's hologram, even if it may be a little bit of a stretch that technology and people who work on holograms are able to set up a tractor beam with it. Similarly, I think the way that they bring everybody back to life using the cryogenic freezing or reversing the cryogenic freezing process is also well set up with having Rylan in this episode. It isn't just there for a cameo. Him being cryogenically frozen and being brought back to host this song contest is kind of set up for how they save the people at the end of this episode. But similarly to the negatives that I was just talking about, we don't get any kind of comeuppance or dealing with the corporation and what the corporation has done at the end of this episode. Cora just kind of sings her song and moves on, and we don't really get to see the Doctor dealing with the corporation or dismantling the corporation or anything like that, which I think is really unfortunate. Obviously, we then get a return of the Graham Norton hologram to give us the exposition about what's happened to the Earth, setting up the finale, and we end on a great cliffhanger of the TARDIS doors exploding. But obviously, that isn't where this episode ends. Obviously, this episode ends with the reveal that Mrs. Flood is in fact the Rani as she bi-generates into a new Rani, or with a new Rani bi-generating from her, which I just personally felt like was a very boring and underwhelming reveal, not only because people had already been speculating that this was going to be the Rani and that it seemed like a very obvious choice, but just by the way that it was done in the episode. I feel like this was meant to be this season's equivalent of the Master reveal in Utopia, and I just think it comes across nowhere near anything quite as impactful as that reveal. Obviously, not every reveal has to be as huge and impactful as that, and we might get a bigger reveal at the end of the first part of the finale, but this just felt like a very underwhelming and tacked on moment in the episode when compared to that reveal, which was a big part of the main episode with a significant amount more build up to it and not just a tacked on post-credit scene. And the Doctor and Belinda aren't even there to witness it. But with that being said, I will say that I do like the theme that we get from Murray Gold for the Rani. Like I said, I don't necessarily mind the reveal that Mrs. Flood is the Rani. I think it's just the way that it was handled in this episode, and I think the double acts between these two Ranis, or the Rani and Mrs. Flood, could be very interesting for the finale. But it does also feel a bit weird considering bi-generation is meant to be so rare, and before the Doctor bi-generated it was meant to just be a myth. And unfortunately there was also just no progression of Mrs. Flood throughout this season to make it anywhere near interesting when it was revealed who she actually was. She was just showing up at the end of every episode, or maybe briefly in the middle of an episode. The only thing she really did was set Conrad free, which is obviously going to play a part in the finale, and showing an interest in the Vindicator. So like I said, I just think the reveal itself was very boring and underwhelming. So like I said at the start of this video, I didn't really have high expectations going into this episode due to it being about Eurovision and just not really seeming like something I'd be that interested in. And for the first half of this episode, I was actually quite surprised by how much I was enjoying it, which maybe was just because I went in with such low expectations. But when we get to the second half of the episode, or the last third, whenever it is, it just really doesn't work for me because of the Doctor and Kid and the confrontation they have there, which just feels very optically wrong with what they're doing and the message they're trying to get across, if this is meant to be talking about the current situation with Eurovision and the current state of Eurovision, because I just think they completely missed the mark on that, and it's kind of offensively bad. And I would basically compare this as being this season's version of Kerblam, or this era's version of Kerblam, with having such a terrible ending with such bad political messaging. And like I said as well, I just personally think the Mrs. Flood reveal at the end of this episode was so underwhelmingly done and just felt very tacked on to the episode instead of being a big part of the episode. And like I said, the Doctor and Belinda aren't even there to witness it, unfortunately. But let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments down below. Do you think I'm wrong with this? And are you excited for the finale? And before this video ends, I'd just like to give a shout out to my patrons JB, Tom Baker, Lewis, Andy Collin, flippredd, theunquest, James Box, Oliver Underwood, TheBeastBoss, and LukeN.B.N. These are all free members who, along with getting their names read out here, also get some behind the scenes updates such as thumbnail previews and a free monthly newsletter. To get your name read out at the start of videos, as well as getting early access to videos and exclusive content, you can join as a paid member. And in celebration of Doctor Who Season 2, I'm currently running a 50% discount off your first month on any tier if you use code Season2. I'll make sure to have my Patreon linked in the description down below. So subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.